She slipped away, her final breath cradled in quiet reverence, surrounded by kin. Yet the man entwining his fingers with hers was a stranger to every soul in that room. And when the truth unraveled, it did not whisper. It swept through the air like a tempest, cloaking the space in a silence so heavy it pressed against every chest. None of them had anticipated the letter she left behind. The hospital room stood hushed, time itself seeming to hesitate. Machines murmured a low mechanical hum, while streaks of amber sunlight threaded their way through the half-shuttered curtains, scattering fractured gold across the dull linoleum floor. The windowsill bloomed with flowers, bouquets sent by colleagues, neighbors, distant friends and near ones, their perfumes saturating the air as if attempting, in vain, to veil the unmistakable trace of death itself. By Claire's bedside sat a man, his eyes tender and rimmed with exhaustion, his shoulders bowed under invisible weight. Michael's hand enfolded hers, thumb sweeping slow, reverent circles over her fragile skin. His face bore the raw edges of sleeplessness, yet no hint of weariness or bitterness marred his features. Only devotion rested there, quiet, unwavering, absolute. His gaze never faltered, never drifted to the other figures scattered about the room. He didn't flinch when Claire's brother cleared his throat by the door, nor when her mother, face drawn and distant, dabbed meticulously at her eyes and refused to acknowledge him. He remained, steadfast, unmovable, whispering soft strands of words to the woman he cherished beyond articulation. She no longer responded. It didn't matter. His voice still found her. "You were courageous," he breathed, voice raw with memory, even when they chose blindness. Especially then. Across the room, Claire's family sat locked in formal stillness. They perched uneasily on chairs wheeled in by nurses, an arrangement too temporary, too clinical to soften their brittle posture. Her mother, Eleanor, wore her pearls like armor, and her hair twisted into a severe bun that had not loosened since the Reagan years. Her spine held its perfect line, her expression carved from porcelain. The only crack appeared when her gaze flickered toward the man beside her daughter. Then her lips compressed into a thin line, and her chin lifted defiantly away. Her father loomed by the window, arms folded so tightly they might fracture, his eyes distant and fastened on the traffic ebbing through the parking lot below, as if he longed for one of those passing cars to spirit him away from this unbearable scene. A nurse entered, discreet and efficient, adjusting the IV line. She nodded toward Michael. "Mr. Ellis, let us know if you require anything." From across the sterile expanse, Claire's mother's eyes narrowed, her lips barely parting as she echoed that name under her breath. Ellis. The word fell like a stone into still water. Michael heard, of course he heard, but as always, no reaction stirred in him. His wedding band shimmered faintly as he tenderly brushed a stray lock of Claire's hair from her forehead. The same ring he had never removed since the day they vowed themselves to each other in that quiet, near-forgotten courthouse 7 years prior. She wore hers too. Few had ever noticed. But today, in this room where truth could no longer be muffled, the light caught it just right, and it shone. Eleanor's brows knit together, her gloved hand closed like a vice around the strap of her purse. No words passed between them. No one had ever inquired whom Claire had spent her holidays with when she gracefully declined family invitations. No one had asked who accompanied her on her impromptu travels, nor why she always returned with eyes that glowed brighter than they had left. Claire had never volunteered an explanation. She had learned long ago that it wouldn't have been welcome. Michael had been a ghost to them for years, invisible, unacknowledged. Yet now, at the end of all things, he was exactly where Claire had always dreamed him to be, beside her, in full sight. No longer hidden, even if they still refused to see him. He bent lower, forehead resting delicately against hers. "You never needed their blessing," he murmured, voice cracking, and you never beg for it. The heart monitor pulsed steadily, but an intangible shift rippled through the room. The air thickened, brittle in charge. Somewhere a cousin cleared her throat, another glanced impatiently at a wristwatch. Michael noticed none of it. None of them knew how Claire's smile bloomed in the quiet morning light. None of them had held her trembling form through the bleakest chapters of her diagnosis. None of them had tasted her laughter in the dark, when the power failed and they lit candles, not for light but for closeness. They had never known her, not as he had. So he remained, silent, rooted, indisputable. His eyes drifted to the leather bag tucked beneath her hospital bed. From one frayed corner, a glint of silver peeked, the edge of a photo frame. Carefully, reverently, he drew it free. Behind the glass shimmered a captured moment, Claire radiant and sun-dappled, her head resting on his shoulder, waves tumbling behind them. Their anniversary at Myrtle Beach, the rare sanctuary where mass had been unnecessary, where her love breathed openly, but concealment had been their lifelong script. He remembered vividly the day they married. There had been no grand ballroom, no family lining pews, just the two of them, hand in hand, beneath the high ceilings of a county courthouse. Claire had worn a soft blue dress and a smile laced with nerves. Michael had donned his best suit, the one tailored long ago for a job interview. Their only witnesses were two trusted friends who understood how fierce and fragile their bond was. No social media proclamations, no engraved invitations. Claire had insisted she didn't want the noise. Michael had understood better. She didn't want the condemnation. He remembered, too, how she slipped her ring into her purse every time she returned to her family's house. How she conjured excuses on holidays. Next year, she would whisper with hopeful melancholy, "Maybe next year it'll be easier." And he had accepted that, not from weakness, but from love. On Christmas Eve, as she departed for yet another family dinner, Michael remained home simmering her favorite soup for when she returned. She came back hours later, makeup smudged, eyes red-rimmed, her silence an answer in itself. He kissed her temple and folded her into his arms anyway. Once in the stillness of their apartment, he had asked gently, "Do you ever wish we were simple for them?" Tears welled as she whispered, "I'm protecting you." He had smiled and nodded, but something inside him had cracked irreparably. Now in this sterile room, thick with half-spoken assumptions and quiet denial, muted whispers drifted around him like white noise. Claire's aunt leaned toward her cousin, lips pursed with pity. "Poor man, must be just our dear friend," Michael heard. Of course he did. He always had. But he said nothing. His love had never required their validation. His grief owed them no explanation. Still it stung. His thumb brushed the photograph's glass once more. That smile, that freedom, that unguarded version of her no one else in this room had ever witnessed. He remembered how she once crumbled against his chest, whispering, "I hate that I can't share you with them, but I will. One day." He had believed her, because despite her fears, her love had never dimmed. It had thrived in her quiet rituals, in the way she kissed him twice each morning before leaving for work, in the way she saved her richest stories solely for him. And now, here he was, holding her hand as he had vowed to do, as her husband, in a room brimming with people who only knew half her heart, but he had known all of it. And that was enough. The muted hush fractured only by the rhythmic chirp of monitors. Claire's breath grew thinner, frailer. Her hand loosened within Michael's, their fingers still entwined exactly as they had been that first lazy afternoon they'd fallen asleep on the couch, their unfinished TV show long forgotten. Michael had barely shifted since dawn. He hadn't eaten. He hadn't slept. He had merely held on, physically, spiritually, to the one person who had ever made silence feel like sanctuary, not solitude. The door creaked softly. Claire's mother entered, her pearls cinched high and tight, her heels clicking against the tile with militant precision. Her complexion was ashen, but her gaze was flint, cold. Behind her, a young priest shuffled meekly, fingers curled around a worn Bible as he muttered prayers of absolution. Margaret, unyielding, unsmiling, strode straight to the bedside, ignoring Michael entirely. Her voice sliced through the stillness. She would want a final prayer. Please. Then, turning with deliberate force, she pinned Michael with a pointed stare. He can wait outside. Michael did not move. He didn't need to. Margaret's steps closed in, her voice sharpening like a blade. This is a family moment. Before Michael could part his lips to answer, a soft but unwavering voice resonated from the doorway. She asked for him to be here, the nurse said gently. Her badge caught the dim hospital light. S. Rios, RN. He is not just here as a guest, she added with quiet certainty. Margaret's spine straightened, her tone clipped and brittle. He is not family, she snapped, the words sharp enough to fracture glass. The nurse stepped farther into the room, her calm unwavering. She rested a steadying hand on the priest's arm, pausing the solemn ritual. He is legally. He is listed as her husband, both in her advance directive and her medical file. Michael stood silent, unshaken by the coldness swirling around him. With slow, deliberate movements, he reached into the inner pocket of his coat and withdrew a worn, creased folder. The beige paper curled slightly at the corners, weathered by time and handling. He unfolded it carefully, as if it were fragile silk, and angled it toward the light. There it was, Claire's signature, poised and unmistakable, resting above the printed words. Next of kin, Michael Joseph Carter, spouse. The priest blinked, uncertainty flickering across his face. The nurse gave him a quiet, knowing nod. Margaret's breath faltered. Her lips parted as if to speak, but nothing came out. Then, without meaning to, her gaze dropped to Claire's hand, where the wedding band still sat gleaming on her finger. The very ring she had spent the morning trying not to see. Michael did not gloat. He did not say, "She picked me." He did not say, "She chose me even when she could not tell you." He simply folded the directive again with reverent fingers and tucked it back into his coat. And then softly, silently, he turned back to Claire, brushing a loose strand of hair from her pale forehead. The priest cleared his throat, his voice gentle now. Would you like to join in the blessing?" he asked, this time directing the invitation towards Michael. Michael nodded once, steady and sure. "She believed in grace," he said quietly. "Let us give her that." As the priest resumed his prayer, Margaret remained unmoving at the foot of the bed. Her arms folded, her posture locked in a strained blend of confusion and discomfort. But Michael had already returned to what mattered most, his hand wrapped tenderly around Claire's. In that small space between judgment and restrained grief, he was no longer invisible. He was no longer hidden. He was undeniably exactly who Claire had declared him to be, in writing, in love, and in truth. Her husband, her family. The funeral concluded beneath a muted afternoon sky, the kind of gray that presses silence into every crevice. Claire's family gathered in stiff, fragmented clusters beneath the old oak trees. Their conversations drifted shallow and meaningless. Polite remarks about how beautiful the flowers were, how nice the service had been. No one spoke of Michael. He had stood alone. Not because he had chosen solitude, but because life had placed him there time and time again. Later that evening, inside the dim quiet of Claire's childhood home, her younger sister Emily wandered into the study. Dust veiled the picture frames, thin film settling over forgotten books. She was not searching for anything in particular. She was simply reaching, trying to feel her sister's presence in a space Claire had always called her sanctuary. The only room that felt like mine, Claire had once said. Emily knelt and opened the bottom drawer of the old desk. Her breath caught immediately. Resting atop a worn blue leather journal sat a small cream-colored envelope. In Claire's distinct, neat handwriting, it read, "To my family. Please read after I'm gone." Her hands trembled as she lifted it. Hesitating, she carried it to the sitting room, where their parents remained seated. Margaret perched on the edge of the couch, her jaw clenched tight. Their father nursed a cup of cold tea, untouched for hours. "What is that?" Margaret asked stiffly. Emily sat slowly, her voice breaking into a whisper. "Claire left us a letter." No one moved. No one breathed. Emily broke the seal carefully and unfolded the paper, her hands shaking. Then softly, deliberately, she began to read aloud. "If you are holding this, I am already gone. I debated writing this, but there are things I could not say while I was alive, and now I have nothing left to lose. You never truly knew Michael, but I did. I knew every part of him. The way he steadied me when fear made my bones rattle. The way he listened without judgment. The way he made me feel safe in a world that told us we were wrong. You always thought I kept him away out of shame. That is not true. I kept him away to protect him. From your judgment, from your whispered insults, from your smiles that never reached your eyes. I did not want the man I loved to be treated like less than he is." Emily's voice faltered. Across from her, their father lowered his gaze. Margaret's lips compressed into a thin, colorless line. Emily swallowed and pressed on. "I was diagnosed a year ago. I did not tell any of you because I knew what would follow. Drama, control, cold comforts. Instead, I chose differently. Michael and I were married again, in the little chapel near the lake, just the two of us. I wore a white dress, and he cried during the vows. It was the happiest day of my life, even though I knew it would be one of my last. You may think he was not family, but he was my family, my only real family in the end. So if you still believe he was a mistake, that is fine. But know this. My final wish was to be held by him as I left this world, and he gave me that, even knowing what he would face when I was gone. Please, let go of your pride. It is too late for me, but it is not too late for you." Love, Claire's silence descended like a heavy curtain. Margaret blinked rapidly, her mouth slightly ajar but empty of words. Emily folded the letter carefully and set it back on the table without speaking. She did not need to. Their father reached up and removed his glasses, wiping lenses that were already spotless. For the first time in years, unshed tears rimmed his eyes. Down the hall, the grandfather clock chimed once, soft, distant, like time itself releasing something it had clung to far too tightly. Upstairs, the blue journal waited beside an old photo album. And somewhere, across the quiet miles, Michael sat alone in their tiny living room, surrounded by empty teacups and the lingering scent of her favorite lotion, still clinging to a scarf she used to wear. He did not know the letter had been read. He did not need to. He had lived it. Every word, every day, every moment. By midday, the sun hung high over the cemetery, drenching the small hill in a soft golden light. Trees swayed gently, their branches whispering to one another like voices long departed, still telling stories to the earth. Michael walked slowly along the gravel path, a bouquet of white peonies cradled carefully in his hand. He did not rush. He never had when it came to her. Claire's headstone stood beneath an old elm tree, simple and graceful, exactly how she would have wanted it. No ornate carvings, no elaborate epitaphs, just her name, the years of her life, and a single quiet line etched beneath them. loved deeply, always returned. Michael knelt beside it. His fingers brushed away a few fallen leaves at the base of the stone. He laid the peonies down, arranging them meticulously, then sat back on his heels, letting silence embrace him. No one else had come today. He had not expected them to, and that was okay. He exhaled slowly. "Hey," he murmured softly, his voice barely carried by the breeze. "I finally got the courage to visit the beach again." A faint smile tugged at his lips. His eyes misted, though no tears fell. "The bench is still there. Your name's still carved in the corner. I sat on it for a while. Remembered how you laughed when I told you the water was too cold, and you dove in anyway." He paused, lowering his head. "They did not have to know me," he whispered. "You did. That was enough." The wind picked up slightly, tugging gently at the hem of his coat. Michael reached into his pocket and drew out a small photograph, one of the rare few they had taken together. Claire in her straw hat, Michael squinting into the sunlight, both of them caught mid-laughter. He placed it beside the flowers, weighing it down with a smooth stone. Unseen by him, a car door closed softly in the distance. A young nurse returning from a visit to her grandparents' plot nearby paused as she noticed him. A tall black man kneeling, not in mourning exactly, but in something quieter, deeper. Her hand lifted to her chest as she watched the way his shoulders remained steady, the way his silence brimmed not with emptiness, but with presence. Something inside her shifted. She reached for her phone and dialed. "Dad?" she said softly. "No, nothing's wrong. I just, I just wanted to tell you I love you." Michael rose to his feet, brushed dirt from his knees and looked skyward. The sunlight had fully broken through the trees now, casting warm light across Claire's headstone like a quiet benediction. He gave a small nod, as though to someone standing just beside him, then turned and walked back down the gravel path, his steps slow, measured, echoing softly against the stones. He carried not just grief, he carried peace, because sometimes love does not need an audience. It does not dress itself in approval. It does not wait for permission to bloom. It simply needs truth. And when the world shuts its eyes, love still shows up anyway. Beneath the wide canopy of summer leaves, Claire's grave rested in quiet dignity. The breeze stirred gently, brushing past her headstone like a whispered memory. Just beside it, tucked carefully into the grass, rested a single wedding photo, faded at the corners but vibrant at the center. Claire and Michael, arms wrapped around each other, smiling so wide you could almost hear their laughter echoing through the image. The sun caught the photograph at just the right angle, and a soft golden glow shimmered across it, like the universe itself had tipped its hat to what it had witnessed and had never dared interrupt.